Good morning. Welcome back to another Bible Coffee. I'm Travis. I'm excited to have you all here with me as we are getting off to another beautiful morning and looking into another beautiful chapter of Scripture, chapter 45 of Genesis. So if you would, please join me as we dive right in. Please remember that I'll be reading from the column on the right, the JPS Tanakh translation. The column on the left is the NRSV. You're invited to follow along on either side or in your Bibles at home, or just listen as we read. Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone withdraw from me." So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. His sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still well?" But his brothers could not answer him, so dumbfounded were they on account of him. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come forward to me." And they came forward. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, he whom you sold into Egypt. Now don't be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me hither. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. It's now 2 years that there have been famine in the land, and there are still 5 years to come in which there shall be no yield from tilling. God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival on earth and to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of all his household and ruler over the whole land of Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You will dwell in the region of Goshen, where you will be near me, you and your children and your grandchildren, your flocks and your herds, all that is yours. There I will provide for you, for there are 5 years of famine to come, that you and your household and all that is yours may not suffer want. You can see for yourselves, and my brother Benjamin for himself, that it is indeed I who am speaking to you. And you must tell my father everything about my high station in Egypt and all that you've seen, and bring my father here with all speed." With that he embraced his brother Benjamin around the neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. He kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. Only then were his brothers able to talk to him. The news reached Pharaoh's palace. "Joseph's brothers have come." Pharaoh and his courtiers were pleased. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do as follows. Load up your beasts and go at once to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall live off the fat of the land." And you are bidden to add, "Do as follows. Take from the land of Egypt wagons for your children and your wives, and bring your father here. And never mind your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt shall be yours." The sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had commanded, and he supplied them with provisions for the journey. To each of them, moreover, he gave a change of clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and several changes of clothing. And to his father he sent the following: 10 he-asses laden with the best things of Egypt, 10 she-asses laden with grain, bread, and provisions for his father on the journey. As he sent his brothers off on their way, he told them, "Do not be quarrelsome on the way." They went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, "Joseph is still alive. Yes, he's ruler over the whole land of Egypt." His heart went numb, for he did not believe them. But when they recounted all that Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. "Enough," said Israel. "My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die." The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of the Lord lives forever. And this is the word of the Lord. All thanks be to God. So Joseph could no longer control himself. Joseph has been really good about controlling himself. We remember him from a little boy when he had no filter over the things he said. He was being kind of a twerp, and his brothers were not fond of him. They were angry at him. They hated him. They sold him off to Egypt. Joseph, as himself as a kid, was a little bratty and hard to deal with, but he has grown up an awful lot since then. He's mature. That was the early version of himself. Was a little bratty, but walking with God nevertheless. Now he's grown up. He's matured, and he's walking with God in a new way. But he's been really good about controlling himself in very stressful, tough, quarrelsome situations. Joseph has been able to hold it together when he was accused of wrongdoing in Egypt, and he managed to keep following the word of the Lord and interpreting dreams while concealing his true feeling. And here with this whole situation with his brothers, he's been concealing his identity. He's been seeking to control himself, to stay in control of the situation, because of the idea that as long as I don't let my true self out, I can still be in control. However, Joseph could no longer control himself at this point. He hollers out for his attendants to leave his presence so they don't hear him lose control. And he says to his brothers, he finally lets himself out in front of his family. I'm Joseph. Is my father still well? And his brothers were so dumbfounded still. Joseph then revealed himself to them further. They hug, they kiss. He gives them instructions to go get the family to come back, because this is the real deal. This is the real Joseph, and his real concern is taking care of the family. That's what he really cares about. He didn't really care about getting back at them, making them feel a certain way. That's what he thought he wanted. That was all part of his means for being in control of the situation. But he himself, even in this passage, admits that he was never in control. It's not him who's in control at all, and it wasn't them who were in control even at the time. But he said, God had made me Lord of all Egypt. This is God's doing. God sent Joseph ahead of them to save life, to save their lives, to save the lives of the whole family, to save lives of many, many more people. Despite the control that they were each trying to maintain and show, God was working underneath that and making good things happen anyway. Couple of interesting things here where he gives gifts to everybody and gives them provisions, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and several changes of clothing. So this harkens back to the silver that they sold Joseph for, the 20 pieces of silver, except now it's 300 pieces of silver. So what is that, 15 times 20? I think my math is right. I'm not sure if there's a significance to that 15 or if the significance is in the 300. We know 3 is a holy number, and so 3 could possibly be compounding on that. Whatever the case, this is a sign of things being made right, and part of that is this silver that's being given instead of somebody being sold for it. And these clothes that are being given, he gave everybody a change of clothes. Remember, they took his clothes, they took his ornamented tunic, his coat of many colors, or how it's translated in different ways, but they took that from him. They stripped him of his clothing, and here he gives them changes of clothing, and he gives Benjamin several changes of clothing. But that doesn't take away from the bond that Joseph has with anybody else, because he loves them all just as much. They are all brothers, they are all family, and what really matters to Joseph is that they're coming back together. So we have these things reminding us of stuff that happened earlier on the way, except this time they are brought into the picture for reconciliation. Another interesting point where he sends his brothers off on their way. He knows they are a quarrelsome bunch. He knows they are a bunch who fights for control, and to them he says, do not be quarrelsome on the way, because he knows our need for control leads us to be quarrelsome, because then we have to fight for control over each other. This is a particularly quarrelsome time in our lives today, in our nation and around the world, with the virus and the economic stuff and the racial stuff and the election stuff, all the political stuff. We are very divided, very quarrelsome, each trying to be in control, fighting for control. We are showing a version of ourselves that is trying to maintain control, as Joseph was showing a version of himself that he wasn't able to control any longer, and that just bursts open with who he really is. So perhaps that's a good little point for us to hang on to from this scripture, do not be quarrelsome on the way, because Lord knows we need to stop being so quarrelsome along our ways. Word gets back to Jacob. They tell him Joseph is still alive. Jacob must go there immediately to see his son before he dies. He knows, especially at his age, what really matters, who he really is, what he really wants and needs to see in his life for fulfillment. And perhaps that's something that God may be speaking to us about, where fulfillment comes from. Our fulfillment does not come from us maintaining an image of being in control. It doesn't come from actually competing and attaining control. Fulfillment comes at this time of revealing their true selves, resolving conflict, and reconciling, coming back together. Not only are they coming back together, reconciling the things that they've been through in their immediate family throughout the course of Joseph's life and his brothers' lives, but also hearkening back to Jacob's life, Jacob and Esau, and Isaac's life, Isaac and Ishmael, and Abraham's life with Sarah and Hagar. There has been a lot of conflict in the family throughout these stories that we've been reading, and this chapter brings things together. That what this family wants is not only reconciliation for what they've been going through lately, but for reconciliation throughout generations. And perhaps that goes along with where God is actually mentioned in the passages that God sent me ahead to ensure your survival on earth, to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. God has been working behind the scenes. God knows that our fulfillment comes from being our true selves and being our true selves with each other, working together, humbling ourselves, and letting love shine. God knows that's what we really want, what we really need, despite whatever show we try to put on for the world or even just for ourselves. So God is working underneath to help things come out well for us, because Lord knows we're vulnerable. That's why Joseph didn't want to show his true self, because he knew that made him vulnerable. That's why we all try to keep control over ourselves, so we don't appear too vulnerable and let ourselves open to be hurt in ways that we don't want to be hurt. But it's important for us to do that, because that's where fulfillment in life comes from, actually living this life as human brothers and sisters, as family created by God. I hope as we hear this message today that we are all encouraged to trust in the Lord a little bit more than ever before, and to be more willing and more courageous to show our true selves, to come across our divisions, our anger, those things that we've been hanging on to for so long, that we can work out some of the dysfunction, whether it be in our actual immediate families, or whether it be in our greater human families of societies, nations, the world altogether, and seeing each other as something beautiful to be a part of in this life. Well, I don't know, but the picture today is the picture from last time. We don't have an answer on it yet, and we would like to know in what biblical city this picture comes from. Clearly it's a picture of Jesus' baptism. Your biggest clue there is probably the river that Jesus is in, and we all probably know what that river is, so please make your best guesses and let us know what you think. Thank you all so much for being here with us again today. Bible Coffee. Hopefully we'll see you again on Tuesday. May the Lord bless you and keep you.